Federal government's key priorities for tackling drought is building dams and quickly. This week, the federal and New South Wales government announced a $1 billion water infrastructure package. The centrepiece, upgrading the Wyangla Dam in the state's central west and building a new one, the Dungowan Dam near Tamworth.
This really does talk to our comprehensive response, our consistent and determined response. And you know what? It's the first call on the budget federally, and it's not set and forget.
Scott Morrison praised the New South Wales government for joining them in rolling up their sleeves. His Water Minister, David Littleproud, has previously not been as flattering to his state counterparts.
The states are doing 3/5 of bugger all in terms of building infrastructure to supply urban water as well as agricultural water.
But are dams the solution for more? We're joined in Canberra by senior water researcher at progressive think tank the Australia Institute, Maryanne Slattery. Good to see you, Maryanne.
Hi, Ellen.
The government says we're not building enough dams. Barnaby Joyce says that he's going to fight caftan by caftan, endangered frog by endangered frog to get dams built. But are we building dams in Australia?
Well, we are actually building more dams, Ellen. They just happen to be private dams. There's been many new dams, tens of, more than 30 new dams that have been built in the Murray-Darling Basin under the Murray-Darling Basin plan, under the efficiency program. And these dams are not small dams. They're not the sort of things that you see on a hobby farm as you drive into Canberra or Sydney or Melbourne for a few horses and a house cow. These things are several square kilometres in size. They're relatively deep for private storages, so 8 to 10 metres deep, and they've been built for new cotton operations.
Okay, and so who's paying for these dams? How do they come to be built?
Well, we're paying for the dams, Ellen. The dams are being funded under the Commonwealth's efficiency program, under the Basin Plan. That program is supposed to create water savings through upgrading irrigation, but not building new dams. And so the real question is, how can a new dam be a water saving? Well, it can't, because you need more water to grow the same amount of crop if you store water in a dam because of evaporation.
Okay, so just take me through that. I mean, the argument is, okay, if you irrigate and then you have runoff, well, you could capture that. If it rains, you could capture more water in a dam. If you have a storage facility on your property, surely to goodness, you'll have more water.
Yes, when we asked the Commonwealth to justify how the efficiency program could fund new dams, they responded by saying these dams are built for tailwater, water that runs off a crop and then it's recaptured rather than running back into the river. But these dams are just so large, there's no way that they're being used for tailwater. And we've seen the documentation that justifies these dams, and they're there to capture water that used to go to the environment and take more water out of the river. So they're robbing the environment of water, and they're also robbing downstream users of water.
Okay, and when you say you need more water out of one of these smaller, but albeit quite large private dams on your crop than you would if you made a call on the local public dam, that's simply because there's more evaporation if you keep it on farm, and therefore you'll need more will evaporate and you'll have the same amount to water your crop. Is that it?
That's right, and water that's kept in large on-farm large public storages, the evaporation from that dam is socialised across all users. Once you take water out of a river that ultimately was stored in the public dam and you put it in a private dam, that farmer is now wears the cost of that extra evaporation, so they do need more water to keep growing the same crop.
So Mel, why would this be happening? I'll ask Mel Peters that one.
Look, it's really difficult. The building of new dams for those towns that are running out of water. The building of a new dam's great. I support that fully. The difficulty is that when it becomes a big enough dam that it is then going to become an irrigation dam, you've then got to try and wrap your head round where does that water come from. Now, the reason why I say that is that that your viewers will recall that we've just spent $12.7 billion on the Murray-Darling Basin plan. and in that we're trying to make sure that the river's healthy. So that's a huge public expenditure of funds in making the river more healthy. Now, in that process, they set up this thing called a sustainable diversion limit,
and that was a cap on how much water you could take out of the system. Yeah.
Exactly. So we're going to build these new dams, and the question I have, because I really don't know the answer, we're going to build these new dams. There's still that SDL. Best science has told us that's what that SDL, that sustainable diversion limit is. That's going to stay there the same. So what happens with this dam water? I don't understand how that works.
So, Maryanne, that's the question. If you build a new dam at Dungowan and it rains and you fill it with water, do you just have to offset that water somewhere else? You have to find water for the environment somewhere else because you've captured it in the dam. You owe the river the water.
If the governments remain committed to the basin plan, then yes, if you capture water in a new dam or an upgraded dam, then you have to offset an equivalent amount from somewhere else, and that will have to come out of the irrigation pool.
And so what's the point of building the dam?
Yeah, I don't know.
Right.
Unless the governments are wanting to water down the basin plan or walk away from the basin plan.
Okay, and secondly, the other question is, what about all those towns running out of water, Maryanne? If I'm sitting in Tamworth, which is one of the, where water security is not guaranteed, Catherine's nodding away here.
Yeah.
And aren't I thinking, well, blow that. I want water security. I want that storage facility next to my town because I don't want to have to live on, 100 litres of water a day.
No, and I think everyone agrees that, we need to have water as the highest priority for towns. The issue is with the way that water is allocated out of a dam. There's a new proposal to have a dam at the Mole River. I've heard numbers as high as 200 gigalitres for that dam. The fact is, if we had a new 200 gigalitre dam in every single valley in the basin, that water would have been allocated to irrigation and used last year. It's the way that the New South Wales government undertakes its allocation policy. They they base their inflows based on droughts up until 2004. They don't base their allocations based on the worst drought on record, which has happened since 2004. So they just assume we're not going to have a repeat of the worst drought. So they've already allocated that water to irrigation.
See, that's interesting, Catherine. I mean, what Maryanne's saying is the rules were changed in New South Wales. It used to be that you had to keep water aside in dams in case you had another millennium drought. Well, now we're in a worse drought than the millennium drought, but that water has been given to irrigators because they decided that that was not necessary. So do we really need to build new dams, or do we need to think about how we share the water?
Look, I actually think there's got to be a bigger play here because we're not treating water as that precious commodity. Whether you're in the town and a city or whether you're farming, we haven't, I don't think as a nation, really addressed water in that way.
But didn't we spend $13 billion with the Murray-Darling Basin Plan to try and figure that out?
And we still haven't quite got there because I think one of the things I've said previously is that the dam levels in our capital cities is actually either below 50% or getting pretty close to that. So even if you're a city dweller, are you using water in the best way?
But if I'm in Tamworth tonight and listening to you, I'm trying to find the world's smallest violin. I mean, or Armidale or Inverell or anyone like that.
I guess what I'm sort of saying, those policymakers should be prioritising water, whether you live in Tamworth or whether you live in the city, because it's still going to be an important issue.
That's the question.
Yeah.
Water for whom?
Yeah, and the water for the environment, balancing that tension with water for agriculture. But I mean, agriculture still is going to be an important thing to provide us with the food and the things that we want to have. Going back to what we were saying is, do you actually change your crop mix? I don't know, I'm not the agricultural expert, but in terms of thinking the big picture, and maybe Mel, I'm not quite agreeing with you, we've got to treat the immediate problem, but we also need to think about a better way to piece this jigsaw puzzle together when it comes to how we consume water, how we value water, in a broader, whether you live in a city or whether you live in Tamworth.
Amy, I'm interested. There was a... Go on, Mel. Yeah, we'll come to Amy.
Well, I was just going to say, the other important thing is that the constructions of dams is being sold as the panacea of helping farmers in drought. I think it's really important that people understand 98% of farmers are not irrigators. Only 2% of farmers are irrigators. So you can build as many dams as you like, and 98% of farmers will get zero benefit out of it at all.
Amy, there was a story in the conversation, an article in the conversation that essentially talked about whether or not, particularly from a city point of view, Australians like the idea of dams because they like the idea of being able to drought-proof the country. And the critique was that is essentially a holdover from a European way of imagining the country.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. And I think that the point that I was trying to make before, and I don't think I quite got there, is I think that we need to look at the immediate issue in terms of the people who are struggling and suffering right now, but we need to shift the trajectory we're on for long term. This idea of drought proofing, where's the declaration of a climate emergency? You know, we had this clip earlier of Joel Fitzgibbon. He wants to have his cake and eat it too. You know, this idea of treat it like we're going to war, but he's basically moved into a lobbying for coal role. You know, like this idea, we can't keep going the way we're going. The climate is changing, and the climate here was never how they perceived when they first set up the industries that we now live within. We need to make some serious adjustments to what we're anticipating is coming. We hope that there won't be a worse drought, but we have no clue, no indication, nothing that says to us, oh no, this will be it, we'll be done with this. All the indications are things are getting worse, the rivers are drying up. There was another mass fish kill today. And this idea of dams, with this romanticised idea, I think, here in the city is we're doing it for the farmers. Yeah. But as Mel said, that's 2% of the farmers that are going to benefit from that. What about the rest of them? What about those that aren't the big businesses? What about the towns that don't even have washing and drinking water in the immediate future? And I think that article in the conversation, they're on the right point. A lot of the things we set up, the road that we laid, was based on this idea that Australia was similar to England, and it's not. And I think we need to begin a bit of truth-telling around that, even though it does challenge this really beloved nationalistic idea of the farmer and how important that is. Farming is still going to be important. We still need food, but I think we need to have more honest conversations about the state of the climate and environment today.
Brett, how committed is the National Party to this dam building initiative?
It's all they want to talk about at the moment. Michael McCormack is the infrastructure minister, but all he talks about is water, largely. He's taking on trying to build a national grid on water. One of the troubles that you have here is that there are a whole lot more people out there in the regions that aren't farmers, that we focus on drought and we focus on water supply based largely on what farmers might think. Well, take a town like Hopetoun in Western Victoria, tiny little town. The only reason it survived the drought that it went through was they were piping into the lake there. It's a tourism spot. You're putting water into the lake there. Businesses were contracting in town, so you had the butcher that's making lattes in his meat shop. You've got the general store, which is selling tents. You've got a whole lot of businesses that are having to diversify what they're doing to just stay afloat, and not enough attention has been put on those people and what they're going through to deal with this to deal with the climate. Yeah. On the nationals, though, I guess the other trouble you have is if you're going all in on dams and water, you're staking everything on a long-term policy that's going to take a whole lot of time to work out if it's going to even deliver what it's promised. Potentially in the short term, it is infrastructure investment. The RBA is saying that there needs to be more infrastructure being spent, and the focus there being that it's jobs and resources that you're going to be using in these communities. So there's potentially an economic stimulus that comes from the dam that might well be better than the water delivery that is much talked about.
Maryanne, often, as Catherine just said, this debate often comes up. It's like, well, you either have water for the environment or you have water for agriculture. That's often how this debate is perceived. Is that really the tension in all this, given that in 2017 you had a record cotton crop, and in 2018 a crop half that size was planted while towns were running out of water? I mean, is the issue how we allocate water in South East Australia?
That's certainly part of the issue, is the water allocation policy, particularly in New South Wales. Under New South Wales Water Management Act, they say that they prioritise the river first, then towns, then the irrigators, when in actual fact they prioritise completely the opposite way around. They allocate for irrigation, then towns, and then the environment comes last.
And so would that have made any difference, given the ferocity of this drought, had they allocated any differently, given that there's no water?
Well, there would have been less water given away to irrigation in previous years, and therefore more water in the dams, so towns wouldn't be on water restrictions as early.
Okay, so it would have made a difference in terms of when they were on water restrictions. So if you change the way in which water was allocated and then you ensure that it was allocated in the way that you say the government says it should be allocated, would it then make sense to build dams if you knew that they were going to provide water security for inland communities?
Well, any dam is going to displace water and is going to be taking water away from downstream users and the environment. The Murray-Darling Basin Authority has undertaken, as Mal said, the basin plan and determined, supposedly based on best available science, a sustainable diversion limit. You know, if we accept that science, that is the limit, and we can't take any more water away from the environment or downstream users.
Yeah. Great issue. Thanks so much for coming on the program, Maryanne. Much appreciated, and thanks to the panel. A wonderful discussion tonight. Thanks for being with us. Good night to you.